Welcome to PSYWAR. We are the official podcast of the Psychological Operations Regiment. So on this week's episode of PSYWAR, we're doing something a little different. We have construction going on in our main studio, which brought us over here to a different studio. So the setting's a little different, and also additionally, we're doing a more academic piece this week. We had Chief Warrant Officer Heeg contacted me, and he wanted to talk about the shining path and the conflict in Peru, and basically all the different aspects of PSYOP in it. So let's get right into it. But like, what were, other than that, or I mean, you could expand on those two as well, but what were the general messages or narratives that they were running with as far as the PSYOP side of the house goes during the conflict?
Right. So, yeah, definitely, targeting the military and police. So they would, at the very tactical level, they would put out messaging that, the officers are eating steak while the enlisted swine are eating crap, right? So different messages like that to kind of separate the enlisted from their officers and their leadership. Just trying to not even, get some defectors, but just make it so they don't want to fight. Those type of very tactical actions. Kind of at the higher level, you see them, became what they called the cult of Guzman. So Guzman was the absolute leader of the group, and so they kind of built up his persona over time, and they built it up to the fact that they called him the fourth sword of Marxism. So you had Marx, then you had Lenin, then you had Mao, and now we have Guzman. He's going to lead us. And we're going to tear down Peru and rebuild it into a, communist utopia. So that was kind of the main, to garner support. That was probably the main overarching theme of their PSYOPs campaign.
So when we talk about how they used Guzman himself as like a symbol to try and really increase the support for, as you call it, like the cult of Guzman and the shining path. One thing I found interesting is in all the pictures and paintings and murals and products that I see that has Guzman being portrayed in, he's in a suit, he's like clean cut, his hair's perfect. Yep. He's often having like a book or sometimes more than a couple books. Whereas like when you look at the same type of leader in other countries or other conflicts in the same time, they kind of look ragged. They're kind of having the more like warrior look to them, or beard, their hair's rough. They have like a woodland camo jacket on. Sometimes they're holding an AK. Guzman took a completely different approach. Right. And he was going and playing off of that, the academic leader, the wise one, things like that. Why do you think he did that? Why didn't he follow, on track with, Che or Castro or any of the other like pro-commie leaders of like revolutions of the time in other countries? Why didn't he follow in suit with them? Why did he, veer off and have his own image? Yeah.
I think part of it was he wanted to separate himself from the Cuban failures. By 1970, everyone realized that you couldn't replicate the Cuban FOCO theory. Even Fidel admitted it by 1969. So he was trying to separate himself from that, and it was also who he was. He was, an academic, like a hardcore academic at heart.
Yeah, he said he had 2 doctorate degrees. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty academic.
So he's always, in a nice tailored suit, open collar, glasses, almost 99% he'll have some type of book he'll be holding. So that's how he portrayed himself as, the academic leader. And it goes to, historical Marxism, which this is, based on history. Here's what's going to happen. And I'm the intellectual leader, and I understand all this, and I'm going to lead you down this preordained path
So
that
how does
Marxism
that
teaches us about.
like symbolic representation of Guzman being this like academic leader, clean cut in a suit, how does that symbol resonate amongst the rural Andes villager people of Peru? Like how did that image influence them? Was it received well or not? I guess I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think, initially, working, their main effort was working through the education system. So I think it did. He had a lot of, um, early on, they called him the Red Sun, Dr. Red Sun, translated from Quechua, which is the main indigenous language in the area, which the Red Sun is in, Ekan lore is, like it's one of the highest things you could be called, right?
Okay.
So it's the sun gives us heat and all this wonderful stuff, right? And then doctors are real in Peru is pretty high title of respect. So
Okay.
you don't have to have a PhD to be called doctor or medical school, right? It's anyone could be called that, but if someone is calling you that, then they're putting you up on a pedestal. So he was Dr. Red Sun, which that's what the local Quechua people called him. So that's, pretty high accolades.
Yeah.
So, how many people believe that? There certainly some did, right? So
Yeah, and that's actually pretty interesting because now that I think about it, everything kind of started happening when the education system itself started to expand anyway.
right,
So these people saw schools move into their area. They now had access and placement to schools that they never had before because they were closed down. And then all of a sudden this narrative starts coming, this indoctrination's happening. And then the leader of all of this is Guzman, who now is portrayed as this extremely wise, intellectual individual. So it's kind of like he saw that, the momentum was moving in that direction anyway. He was indoctrinating, not at least in the beginning through fear and through violence, he was indoctrinating them through education, and he owned that. Which is kind of crazy because as the conflict, begins, which I imagine we're getting ready to talk about, is like he completely switches gears and like his organization switches gears.
right.
They had so much momentum moving in that direction, and then all of a sudden they start committing atrocities and human rights violations and massacres. I think I read one of the times they went in, they brought like 70 some soldiers and they massacred a village of like 70. Yep. And a lot of them were women and kids. And that's what like really led to international attention being, brought forth to the conflict. So why, I guess what I'm saying is why did he switch gears? If you enjoyed this clip, listen to the whole episode by using your favorite podcast streaming service.